Hi, everyone. I'm Annie Rogers, and on behalf of the ADDitude team, I'm so delighted to welcome you to today's ADHD Experts presentation titled New Year, New Systems, Home Organization Help to Clear ADHD Clutter and Shame. Leading today's presentation is Jennifer Snyder. Jennifer is a certified professional organizer and founder of Neat as a Pin, Organizing Experts. Her presentations at the 2024 and 2025 International ADHD Conferences on organization and productivity have earned her recognition as a leader in this field. Jennifer empowers and inspires others through organizing, coaching, and speaking. And to set the tone for today and to underscore that clutter carries with it some serious emotional weight, I'd like to share a few comments we received from you when you registered for this webinar. Someone wrote, "Our home is so cluttered, but I don't know what to get rid of. I end up dumping clutter in a room so my husband doesn't have to see it, but now I can barely walk into that room. How do I even get started? And did I mention I'm a huge procrastinator?" Another person said, "I make endless piles or put things in bags instead of having a good working system. Then I spend hours looking for things like my passport. I need help." Another, I still have boxes to unpack from a move 3 years ago. I'm anxious every time I think about unpacking even a single box." And finally, "I'd like to know how an ADHD person and a non-ADHD person can compromise on organizations and styles that accommodate both. My coping strategy is to have neat piles all over my house. This isn't clutter to my eyes, but it's hard on my partner." If these struggles sound familiar to you, then you are in the right place. In today's webinar, Jennifer will explain why this is all so hard and highlight the neurological, emotional, and cognitive patterns that respond best to practical tools and flexible strategies. So to begin, we would actually like to ask a live poll question to our audience. Tell us, what is your biggest obstacle when it comes to home organization? Please select your answer, and you can always comment under the video player to tell us more. While you do that, I will mention that answers to common webinar questions about slides, transcripts, certificates of attendance, you can find those all in the FAQ tab of your webinar screen. Finally, I am excited to share a sneak preview of the spring issue of ADDitude magazine. In this upcoming issue, readers tell us how much they actually pay for ADHD care for themselves and their children, and what they do without to afford care. And I can tell you it's all very sobering. Our special package on autism includes the latest research into different subtypes, the emotional cost of masking, how to prevent and recover from burnout. Plus, our experts explain the career assessments you can take to find the right job for your brain. If you're not yet a subscriber to ADDitude magazine, visit additudemag.com/subscribe or click the subscribe now tab on your screen. Okay, without any further ado, I am so pleased to welcome Jennifer Snyder. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us today and for leading this conversation.
Great, thank you. It is so good to be here. And we are going to get started with Zoe. I want to introduce you to Zoe. So Zoe is our character. We are going to follow her through her we're going to go with her as she learns what it is that's keeping her home a mess and then how she can do better. And it is my hope that through her, we're going to see a little science, some self-compassion, and a lot of fun to apply it to what we're experiencing as a ADHD mother and wife and business owner with ADHD kids and ADHD husband. All of these things resonate so deeply with me, and I will be using some of my own personal examples along the way. You're free to take them and use them as you wish. But what we're going to do is see how her systems fail and what she can do to to recover and recover without shame. And so, but I want to first tell you about her. Zoe is warm and witty. She is a lot of fun. She is a mother of two. She runs an Etsy shop called Whimsical Waist Knot and describes herself as a compassionate curator of curious creations. What she won't tell you is that she's an impossible perfectionist. She holds herself to impossibly high standards, and she uses charm and humor to hide her shame. And so with her Etsy shops, she works from home. And what happens with that is she's not out in the world, and everyone else doesn't necessarily see where she falls short, but it also keeps her at home where all of the messes are front and center, and she simply can't get away from them. So let's look at Zoe's home. She lives in a nice neighborhood. It's a mid-century modern, and what she desires for her home is to have it where she can use it to showcase her Etsy shop, her finds, and use it to build her business. But instead, it's a mess. It's half decorated. There's always dishes in the sink. She has color-coded bins that do absolutely nothing. She has piles of laundry everywhere, and if they're clean or dirty, no one really knows. There are piles of good intentions absolutely everywhere. She loves her home, and she wants to love her home, but she's so afraid that someone is going to stop by unannounced that she is paralyzed and isolated. She's ashamed, she's embarrassed, she doesn't want anyone to see the clutter. And so Zoe has systems, and she has intentions, and she has containers and infrastructure, although none of it's working. And the reason that it isn't working is because her systems are designed for how she thinks her home should look and not how her brain needs it to work. So what is happening is shame is keeping her stuck in this cycle where nothing really happens. So let's look more deeply at what's happening here. And so the answer lies in what Zoe wants versus what her brain needs. And so she is trying so hard for a perfect home. And the funny thing about perfectionism is that it feels productive, right? It feels like she's doing something. This is good work she's doing. She's going to make it happen regardless of how hard it may be. She's going to try harder, and she's just going to work harder. And that's simply not sustainable. And so here she is spinning her wheels, trying to strive for perfection, when really perfectionism is just the same fear and avoidance as procrastination, which is why I say that it's in a party dress, because it looks good, it's pretty, it's honorable, admirable, but it doesn't do anything. In fact, if anything, it keeps her from achieving what it is that she needs and wants to do. And so let's look at what's going on in Zoe's brain that has her striving for perfection and not getting anything done. So in her brain, her executive function breaks tasks down differently than a neurotypical brain. And so here she is, she loves these beautiful things, and she's looking at these Pinterest pictures, she's looking at Instagram and thinking, this is how my house should be. And that's not how her brain is going to work. She can make her house look like that all day long, but her brain won't be able to support that long term. And so a neurotypical brain can more easily initiate boring tasks, whereas Zoe doesn't. And so her planning power is not as strong as a neurotypical brain. It's different, but it operates differently, and it needs to work differently. And when she tries to plan and she tries to think, here's my pantry, I'm going to put these bins in here, I'm going to color code them, and I'm going to make this great system, she gets so far, she buys the bins, she might even put labels on them, but then the paralysis comes when she can't actually execute that. And so that happens enough, her task initiation is going to plummet, and it's going to turn into avoidance. Because if she tries to do these things often enough and is unsuccessful, then she's just going to avoid them altogether. And what is happening here is her perfectionism, where someone with a neurotypical brain has this flexible thinking, they can pivot. For Zoe, it's all or nothing. Either she does the pantry this way, this time, right now, or she doesn't do it at all. And so it's this all or nothing, perfect or failure. There is really nothing in the middle. And this is just her brain. And it's not anything that she can willpower her way through. It is simply how she is built. And so when we have these three things collide, Zoe can't see the steps. So she has the paralysis. She can't initiate her task because she can't see the reward at the end. And then she can't settle for imperfect. So she's rigid. And so every time a task doesn't happen, her shame builds and it just circles back around into this cycle of shame. And so here we have a graphic of the shame cycle where Zoe is stuck on repeat. So she has these high expectations of herself and she wants to create this perfect pantry, this perfect closet, have this perfect home. She has these high expectations, but it doesn't work. And she just can't follow through. She can't do the things that she wants to do, which is to create these beautiful home systems that don't work for her. So then she feels defeated and she's got this shame. And then that nasty voice in her head starts talking and saying things that, while they're not true, Zoe believes them. And so she's got this nasty self-talk. And then she either does nothing or she overcompensates. And so here comes the overcompensation. I haven't done this well. I can't do this. I messed it up. I'm going to try harder. I'm going to do better. And she puts this tremendous weight upon herself to then back to these high expectations, back around to the defeat and shame and negative self-talk, or she freezes, then things get stagnant and she has to work that much harder to catch up. So that's the shame cycle, the shame spiral, which is no fun at all. But on the other side over here, we have the avoidance loop. And so this task, the pantry, for example, she's got this idea of what it's supposed to be, but it's overwhelming. So she gets started. She buys the bins. This is exciting. There's a dopamine hit from buying the bins. We come home. It's fun to use the Cricut, to put the labels on there. There's another dopamine hit. And then it's time to take the stuff out of the pantry to put in these bins and reposition it. And then that's where there are so many decisions. So many decisions. Is peanut butter a snack? Is it lunch? Where does the peanut butter go? What, soup? Is soup a canned good? Is soup a snack? Is soup a dinner? Where do these things go? And so there's so many decisions. So she's going to get distracted, right? She's going to scroll on TikTok. She's going to procrastinate. She's going to have lunch. She's going to run some errands. She's going to take a nap. And so while these distractions, they create very real relief, they're just short-term relief. And so we've got the avoidance loop and the shame spiral working in connection with one another. And that in the middle leaves Zoe not feeling like she can do anything. She is not good enough. Why should she even try? And then she's paralyzed and she's frozen, stuck in the middle of these two cycles that just keep going. And she doesn't even know she's on them, much less how to get off. But even if she did want to get off, she can't get off one or the other. She has to get off both at the same time. And so she can't change how her brain works. But when she understands how her brain works, that is going to give her the power to break these cycles both at the same time. And I'm going to give you some strategies today that help you do just that. It's not going to be necessarily a magic bullet that's going to make everything better, but it's definitely going to give you the tools to actually do something about it. And so backing up to perfectionism, what is wrong with perfectionism? It sounds good, right? If I wanted to make a perfect pantry, I'm going to make the perfect pantry. I'm going to be proud of it. I'm going to take pictures. I'm going to put it on my Instagram. Look at me. Yay. I met a famous person on an airplane where he was sitting next to me and he wanted to send me pictures of his tea drawer. And as much as I would love to see the tea drawer, it's probably a perfect tea drawer, at least as far as he's concerned. And so perfectionism gives us this pride. It gives us something intrinsically for us to be proud of. But what happens with perfectionism is it promises safety. And so while safety sounds like something that's good, and we all want that, but what it ends up doing is delivering paralysis. Because what it says is if everything is perfect, you'll be safe from criticism and failure. But what actually happens for Zoe is her brain gets stuck analyzing and planning and preparing, waiting for the perfect time to start. And then she's so stuck in the planning that she can't do anything. And so perfectionism also promises control. And it says to us, if you do everything right, you can control the outcome. And as good as that sounds, Zoe's ADHD brain just doesn't work that way. She sets impossibly high standards, then life happens. One small setback, one mistake, one delay, a change in plan, and her brain is off onto the spiral. So instead of adjusting, she freezes. So in this case, perfectionism simply delivers overwhelm. And finally, worth. Worth is something that's important to all of us. And perfectionism says, if you're perfect, you'll finally feel good enough. But that's a lie. Perfectionism keeps moving the goalpost. Even when Zoe does something well, it's never enough. She's never satisfied, she can never celebrate, and she never feels the accomplishment. So for her, perfectionism also delivers more shame. And so the irony is that Zoe's brain knows this doesn't work. So she tries harder and sets higher standards, expects more. And in truth, perfectionism and ADHD is simply a protective response. It's her brain trying to protect itself from the failure, the criticism, the negative feedback. Poor Zoe. And so what we want her to do is to shift her perspective from perfect to possible. And she can shift her focus from what she can't do to what she can. And so this happens through small, simple adjustments. She can make tiny little adjustments that make a really big impact. For example, in her home, if she has a dark, moody corner, if she moves an unused lamp from another area and puts it into that corner, suddenly she has more light. She can use that space. She can see what she needs to do. Or she can move a basket by the door for the mail. And so these small changes, they create quick wins. Quick wins give her a flash of dopamine. And they're also proof that she can do something different. And these accumulate to help her break the cycle. So the small changes equal quick wins, equal proof that it is possible. Then she wants to do it again, and it just feels good. And so clutter. So one of the things that is of a particular issue for many people, not just individuals with ADHD, is clutter. And it was on a lot of the questions that were sent in early is what do we do with clutter? So I want to address that very directly. There's two kinds of clutter. There's visual clutter, that's the stuff you see, and there's functional clutter, which is, for all intent and purposes, a mess with a method. And so the visual clutter is when things are just everywhere. And so when Zoe walks into a cluttered room, she doesn't see what is there. She sees the whole thing. She sees it all at once. And when she tries to tidy up, how do you tidy up this big mountain? You can't tidy up a mountain. And so her brain can't look and see the individual pieces. So she can't say, okay, I'm going to get the dirty clothes out of this room and take just the clothes, or just the clothes at all. Or I'm going to get the trash out so I can see what's left. She doesn't see that. She sees everything, and the everything is overwhelming. This ends up giving her decision paralysis because she doesn't know where to start. And so functional clutter is different from that. And so functional clutter is there for a reason. And we're going to talk about visual cues in a few minutes, but with functional clutter, it's the same stuff, but a different system. And so when Zoe leaves things out where she can see them to remind her that they exist, this becomes the functional clutter. And so the stack of papers as a reminder to do them, that's functional clutter. skincare products on the bathroom counter, that's functional clutter. And so when we think about these two types of clutter, when you're looking at your own things, one of my favorite ways to describe this is deconstructing soup. So think about chicken noodle soup. If you look at a bowl of chicken noodle soup, you see the noodles, you see the chicken, you see the little pieces of carrots or whatever else may be in there. You can pick those out. Those are the low-hanging fruit, but it's everything else. It's the juice, it's the celery and all those things. That's what's left. And so what the functional clutter is going to be those big pieces, where the visual clutter is all the everything else all mixed up together that you just can't see. And so what we want here is balance. We don't want just clutter everywhere, but we also can't necessarily live in a home that's Pinterest pretty. And if anybody can live in a home like that, more power to you. But if you were to go into any random person's home at any given time, they're going to have clutter. And organizers have clutter. Everybody has clutter. And it's about knowing what is out and what you need. And so setting stuff down and just walking off is totally different from saying, I am going to put this here because this is what my brain needs to see. And so Zoe, on our journey, is learning that Pinterest perfect is not practical. But what is? Satisficing is practical. While nothing is perfect, satisficing is what's going to move the needle. And so look at this equation with me. So 100% is perfect. Perfect equals impossible, because perfect isn't possible for anybody, especially Zoe. But that also leads to shame. Whereas satisficing, if Zoe could be happy with 70 to 80%, that is achievable. Perfect is impossible. Satisficing is achievable. But what is satisficing? So satisficing is a term that was coined by cognitive scientist Herbert Simon. What it does is it combines the terms satisfy and suffice, and it means choosing the first option that meets your basic criteria. So rather than endlessly searching for the absolute best, this is good enough. And a great example for this, I had a client one time, she needed a new computer, and she researched computers for years and never made a decision. Bottom line is there's just not that many computers. You shouldn't have to research for years. When you find one that is suitable, that's the one that you take. And so for Zoe, that's the satisficing. When she wants to organize her pantry, 100% isn't possible. But if she can take away the trash, if she can get rid of expired food, that's 70, 80% that works. Where it's good enough. This is the math, the science of for Zoe to say this is good enough. And so while this concept wasn't created for ADHD brains, it was certainly made for it. Because when you understand the satisficing math, then that stops those loops. Because suddenly the perfection stops and good enough becomes the goal. And so let's go back to the pantry example. So Zoe decides to tidy the pantry. She must have it perfectly labeled, every box neatly aligned, every snack perfectly positioned in its bin. Halfway through, she realizes she's bored, she doesn't have time, and that the whole attempt is pointless. Her motivation ends. Then she says, I'm worthless. That's the perfectionism math. It's impossible plus shame equals nothing. Whereas with satisficing, she says, okay, I need to address the pantry. I'm going to do this for 15 minutes. Sets a timer. 15 minutes later, timer goes off. Does what she can, right? So the pantry is cleaned, but not necessarily organized. Zones are functional, but her kids can find their lunches. Is it perfect? No. Is it done? Sort of. But does it work? Absolutely. And so this is giving her the grace to not be 100% perfect. And so in the gap between this perfect and the satisficing at 70 to 80%, that's where Zoe finds her freedom. And that's the real showstopper, because between impossibly perfect and achievable, the gap is massive, but it's full of freedom. And in this gap, Zoe has relief from the perfectionism loop. She has permission to complete enough tasks, not all the tasks, but some. She gets a dopamine hit from finishing. She gets the confidence from progress, and she has the bandwidth to do something next. And so in this gap is where the equation actually changes. So that means that 70 to 80% completion plus consistent effort plus self-compassion becomes sustainable progress. And that for Zoe is a true game changer. And so perfect is the opposite of progress, but satisfying is progress, and progress is the prize. And so have you ever tried to stand on a yoga ball? Yeah. So if you try to stand on a yoga ball, you're going to wobble. And so for those of us with ADHD, a lot of times if we don't have any structure, it's like standing on a yoga ball. But if we were to give some structure around the yoga ball, we still have the fun of the bounce, but we're not wobbly all over. And so for the next little bit, I'm going to use the term wobbly. And when I say that, I'm talking about trying to stand on a yoga ball and you're wobbling around and you just can't get settled. You can't pay attention. You can't focus. You can't do anything. And so for me, the wobbly days are the best example, the best way to actually convey how it feels sometimes when we're bouncing all around. And so there's systems won't stop the wobble, but what they can do is they can become those boundaries. They can become those boundaries that don't close up and squish the ball, but they keep the ball from rolling around. And so that's what systems do. They make the ball easier to navigate, where you can kind of get your balance, but you're still having a good time. And that's really important for ADHD brains. If you take away the fun and make it all boring boundaries and rules, you're not going to get any further than if you didn't have any boundaries in either. So the systems won't stop the wobble, but what's most important when trying to come up with ways to organize and ways to compartmentalize and create systems is inclusion and agency. It is so important that we take our brains into consideration. And because these systems that have too many boundaries, like the pantry, they're not going to sustain the reality of daily life. And so what we need to do is we need to toss out the fantasy of Pinterest perfection and create systems that allow Zoe and us to define our own successes that make us feel capable and confident. And so every time we create a system that works, we are laying another brick in the foundation of our own confidence. And the more confidence we have, the better we can do and the more we can do. And so before we get to structure, there's a couple of other things that need addressing. And so those are the things that make the wobble worse. And so I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. And so complicated systems. So these are the things that we don't want. And Zoe doesn't want to use these. We don't want to use these because they're not going to work for us. So imagine a complicated system. Some of you may be familiar with this out of the box filing system where you have, I think it's a number, maybe like 30, not even a good number, like 25 or however many, 30 days are in a month, but I don't know. So there's this numbering system, and each number corresponds with a topic, and that's where you're supposed to file it. But you've got this piece of paper over here that is your guide telling you what all the numbers mean. So for someone with ADHD trying to file with the system, it's not going to work. It's like, what if you lose the paper with the numbers, or what was that? And I'm not sure. And so here's all of these complicated decisions, and the brain just gets overwhelmed and can't do it. So the complicated systems are going to be harder, and they're going to make things so much more difficult to where you're just not going to want to do them at all. Then there's the long work sessions. So let's say Zoe decides to get up one morning and she's going to clean the garage. She's in it. She's got her coffee. She's got her motivation. It's a beautiful day. She brings everything out of the garage. About 2 hours in, she's wanting to look at her phone, and she's like, now what? And then 3 hours in, it's over. And while it may be over for her, all the stuff is still out in the yard, in the driveway. That all has to come back in. And it's certainly not going to come back in any better than it went out in the first place. And so what is happening is these work sessions are so long, her ADHD brain can't stay focused for that long. What she needs is short mini sessions. If she can just organize the sporting goods, or if she can organize one shelf or something like that, have smaller time frames. Smaller time frames are so much easier to manage, and then you're going to get those quick dopamine hits. And there's the shame-based motivation. One thing that always comes to mind for me is a long time ago, and I don't know if she still does it, there's the fly lady with, you have to clean your kitchen sink. All you're going to do is clean your kitchen sink. And I think this system worked well for a lot of people. It didn't work for me. And so every night you had to clean your kitchen sink. And so what happened with me is a couple of times I didn't clean my kitchen sink, and I'm like, oh, well, there we go. And, I suck. And so all these other people are on the internet cleaning their kitchen sink, doing a great job. And here I am feeling bad about myself. And so shame-based motivation, when it comes to organizing, is sneaky, and it will sneak right up on you before you ever even know it. I'm trying to clean my sink, but I'm really feeling the shame from it. And so we have to watch out for shame-based motivation. And then there's the one-size-fits-all organizing systems. Now, those are the ones that we're going to see on TikTok. Those are the ones that are going to be in the Pinterest pictures or in the fancy magazines on the ads for the Container Store. And to be clear, those aren't real life for those of us with ADHD brains. They may be great for others, but they're just not for us. And so before you buy into and commit into this one-size-fits-all systems, look at it, give it some consideration. How will it hold up to a hard season? And that's really important, because remember, we need flexibility, few decisions, and room to move. And those are the kinds of systems that we need. So now, with those off of our list of options, let's look at some that will work. So visual cues is going to be your secret sauce. Many of you with ADHD already know this. You know that you need to see things to remember them. You know that if you put a piece of paper in a file drawer, it's gone forever. So what we want to do is we want to reframe these visual cues. Instead of, I'm going to leave this out because that is your functional clutter. But what we want to do is we want to make it work for us and really be intentional about how we use these visual cues, so that we're not making visual clutter, but we're having visual cues. And so there is a difference, because we need to see what's important and we need to see what needs to be done. And these are powerful external reminders. And so here's some examples. If everything labeled, if you have a label for everything, then you don't have to see, you don't have to open, you don't have to search necessarily. Now, there's a whole bunch of people out there who love the label makers. And, I have one, don't love it. It's really more trouble to get out and use than it is, than I like it on my thing. I use white masking tape and a black Sharpie. I can label everything with white masking tape and a black Sharpie, and I am just fine with it. And so once you decide what you are fine with, go with it. And if it's fun, then more power to you. I'm not a crafty person. That is the worst thing that I could possibly ever try to do, because the perfectionist in me, it'll never be right. So labels are going to be your friend, but don't make them too hard. And color coding is my favorite. Color coding can save you so much mental energy and so much decision making. Yes, you have to make those initial decisions to assign a color to everyone or whatever they are. But once you do it, it's done. And so I used color coding with my family. And what I did, I started with my children, because one of my kids wasn't using a washcloth and the other one was leaving their towel on the floor in the bathroom. And neither one obviously would own up to it. So I'm like, you use this color towel and washcloth, and you use this color towel and washcloth. And that was it. Don't ever use anything other than those two. Those are yours from here on out. And they did it. And so what happened is it worked so well for us is that we started applying it to everything. I had two boys, and so they were close in age. So their boxer shorts, yours are this color, yours are this color. When I bought them track pants, yours are this color, yours are this color. Tents, sleeping bags, stadium chairs, everything became their color. And so I didn't have to choose what color to buy for them anymore. And I didn't have to sort because I could see instantly who it belonged to. And then when my husband came along, I gave him a color and we just ran with it. And all of my people are still color coded. And so that's how color coding can work. And it doesn't have to be complicated. And you want big categories, not small categories. And the checklists are going to be your friend. They're going to get those things out of your head and where you can see them. And then your reminders along the way. A great reminder is, you put the trash can in the middle of the room on trash day so you don't forget to take it out. You need to take a piece of paper with you. You need to take a bag for returns. You need to do something, take with you out of the house, goes right in front of the door. I can get the stuff to the car, but once I'm in the car, I forget to run the errands. And so I have to put a Post-it note on my steering wheel in the center so that I don't forget. And so these reminders along the way, that's not cheating, and it's certainly not failing in any way. It's just that it has to happen. And so those are the ways for our ADHD brains to remember. And so for Zoe, she has to see things, and mail has been a big thing for her. And so this is an example of Zoe's mail system. So she has a 2-station mail system. The first one is where the mail comes in, and that's what you have here. So all the mail goes in the inbox. If it needs to be shredded, it can go in the shred me bin, or it can just go in the shredder. Notice that she's not setting it on top of the shredder because then it's going to fall over and make a mess. It's in the bin, and then once a week, she takes it, drinks a cup of coffee, goes through the mail, and she sorts it then into other categories where do now, do this week, do later. So it's, I think, do now, file these, and trash is actually what it is. And so anything that she doesn't know what to do with it, she does it this week. So if she's not sure, then she's got to come back to it and make that decision. But it's in a bin. And so she has another set of bins where she does that. And so those are quick decisions. That's not looking at, okay, this has to be paid and this goes here and this goes here, like that filing system. This is simple. Coming in the house, that's 2 choices. And so when she looks at it further, that's 3 choices. And so these easy choices are going to be easy wins, easy dopamine hits, and easy ways to move forward and be more empowered. And so Zoe she's learning a lot of concepts. And so buckets over bins is really one of her main, this is going to be where the rubber meets the road, because she's been trying to use bins with lids. They'll stack, little shoe boxes, they're clear. But what happens is they're stacked up. Anytime she needs to retrieve one or put something in one, it's a 2-handed job, maybe 2-handed job and then some, because you have to take the lid off and put the stuff in and put the lid back on it. Buckets are just easy. So bins require decisions. What goes in here? I have a finite category. I've got a label, I've got a lid, and it's stacked on stacked. A bucket is obvious. And one of my favorite ways to implement this is with ADHD kids. Moms will have me come and say, what can we do to clean their room? Well, I look over in their dresser, the drawers are all hanging open with clothes hanging out. And then I'm like, well, show me what their closet looks like. And they've got all the hangers and all the clothes are on the floor. And it's like, stop trying to put their clothes in the drawers. If you were to get rid of the whole dresser and line up some buckets in their closet, and you've got a bucket for tops, a bucket for bottoms, a bucket for pajamas, and a bucket for socks and underwear, and that's it. You may have some nice clothes on the hangers, but the everyday clothes, they need to be easy and visible. And so that is the example. That is my favorite example of buckets over bins. Bins are going to hide your things. If hiding is what you want, then bins are the way to go. But buckets are going to keep things visible. And then the bins require maintenance. If the contents change, you have to take off the label and you have to move it around, whereas buckets are forgiving. Buckets are just easy. And so if we were to take this back to our pantry example, So instead of the individual bins for pasta, rice, quinoa, couscous, all requiring decisions to identify what they are, one bin, one open top bin that says grains and pasta, she drops it in and there's that. And she's not having to try to figure out whether orzo is a pasta or a grain. And so that's less pressure. That's just easier. And so the buckets mean fewer decisions, faster sorting, and it's just easier. Okay. And so then this counts too. This is where Zoe has self-compassion. And so it's giving yourself credit for what you're able to accomplish, right? And so these are those micro wins. Those are the dopamine hits. Zoe removes the empty boxes from the pantry instead of organizing the whole thing. This counts too. She puts loose batteries in a drawer instead of having them all over. This counts too. So each step makes the next step easier. And what it does is it closes the old loop saying, I didn't finish, I'm a failure, and creates a new one that says, I finished one step and I'm proud of my progress. So she's literally retraining her brain. And so when we want to incorporate this into our own life, it's stop whispering our wins and announce them, out loud to yourself, to your dog, to your mom. I put away the measuring cup, boom, I'm done. Or you can reframe it as a sassy teenager. Your brain says, you only did part of it. And you can like, cool, did some of it, more than zero, thanks. And the more fun you have with it, the easier it's going to be. You could also make a done list and not a to-do list. So at the end of the day, make a list of the things that you did, put that on the bathroom mirror. Then tomorrow you wake up with an affirmation. But be sure to share your successes, no matter how small they are. Text a friend, I hung up all the clean clothes today, score. And when she texts you back a fire emoji, that's going to feel good. And that's going to be that dopamine. And that's what we want. And those small wins fuel the confidence. And so we want to get everybody on board though. And so what about our kids? We can figure things out all we want, but with our kids and our spouse, they're totally different people. And so the best things that we can do is enlist their help and say, this is what I want to do here. You share this space too. Would you like this or that? What wouldn't be meaningful for you? How can you find this if I organize it this way? And then let them tell you and hear what they have to say and listen. And then once you have a system, show them, don't tell them. I have people all the time say, I created the system and my family messed it up. Like, did you share it with them? Did you tell them what to do? No. Well, how are they supposed to know? And so we want to show and demonstrate the why and explain the system. And making it a game is the very best thing that we can do. And then each person have their own area. So my husband, his room can be as messy as he wants. I have my own room that I can have however I want. The common areas are shared. And anytime anybody in your family helps, just praise them, give praise in action. And then the kid zones, having these zones, the active play zone, the quiet zone, the build zone, with the toys and with the toy zone with those first three, instead of having the big soup, then you have individual areas. So it's easier for them to clean up. Have open top bins so that easily go in there. They can even be color coded, girl toys, boy toys, active toys, puzzles, whatever. And then having a homework zone separate from everything else where they can just focus and ask them what they need in that zone. Don't send them to the back room where there's beige walls and nothing else back there. They may need the distractions to focus. And then a parking space is where they bring things in. Everyone in the family brings things in and they drop them. And it doesn't have to be perfect, just a place for everybody to have something. And then once a week, you go in and put all the shoes away. Launch zone is where you prep for tomorrow. And that's where the night before you have everything ready to go. And the parking space and the launch zone, those can be separate as long as you have that kind of room. And so chore challengers, this is so fun for me. This is really my favorite. And I don't necessarily have time to go over them in great detail. But these are hacks to getting things done. And they are in the playlist in the event resources. And I just want to say that my favorite is So there's the chore playlist. I've created a list of chores, household chores, and assigned a song, two songs, I think, to each one of them. And you do the chore, you get the songs, put them on a playlist, shuffle, and then whatever song plays, that's the chore that you do. And so these are going to help get you motivated. But my very favorite is the costume cleanup, to where you can be anything. You can be a sports announcer, you can be a pirate or whatever. And so it's just fun to get outside of yourself. And that also gives you the novelty that the ADHD brain needs. And so sometimes life is going to bring a mess. Regardless of the systems that we put into place, there's going to be a mess. So when that happens, don't abandon your systems, just scale down. Do the absolute essentials. You can lower the bar. If you have been looking at your mail every day, look every other day. Or if you've been washing the dishes every day, wash every other day. Just lower the bar, lower what is acceptable, and then lean on your visual cues. Visual cues are going to be your friend. And then the bumpers are going to be how you assign easier versions. The bumpers are going to be, okay, this is what is okay in a crisis. The bumper is going to be a crisis mode checklist. These are the basic things that I need to do. And they're so simple. It's a simplified version of everything, and identifying those ahead of time is very helpful. And then asking for help, to have scripts to ask for help. I know with my friends, I have a code word. If I ask for something specific that I never eat, like rhubarb pie, if I'm like, hey, I need some rhubarb pie, they know that I need help and that I'm too proud to ask. And so having those secret codes are going to be super helpful. And you can help others when they are starting to wobble by giving them the permission to not the pressure, permission to be who they are, even if it's weird. And then to recognize that any progress is progress and perfection isn't necessary. Teach them the satisficing strategy and the visual cues. If it's out of sight, it's gone. And the more that we keep where we can see it, at least in a tidy fashion as best we can, is going to be helpful. And so these are your pocket-sized permission slips. And one thing that I want you to remember is that if your system looks chaotic to someone else but works for your brain, that's genius. End of story. And when you're looking at something, deconstruct the suit. What are the basic pieces? And so ADHD brains are great problem solvers. And so as you approach something, whether it's the boxes that you can't unpack, or it's how do I clean up this room that's been piling up junk for years, go back, pare it down. Instead of taking on everything, what is one small thing that I can do? Even if you get a shovel and pull a handful of stuff out, and I'm going to look just at this stuff, break it down into small pieces, break it down into individual problems. And so if you look at it as a problem from an objective perspective, instead of the emotion of having to do it perfectly, it's going to be so much easier for you. And so it's not okay. I mean, it is okay if you don't find peace in a label maker. And it's okay if tiny steps move your story forward. If it's not glittery, if it's sideways folded, it doesn't necessarily matter. If it works for you, it works for you. And so I have a couple of things I want to share with you. And I know I've almost run out of time, so we have time for questions. But you are in progress. And in progress is exactly where you're supposed to be. And so I created Zoe. She's a figment of my imagination. And so I made her to safely see some of the things that we encounter as individuals with ADHD. And to let you know where she is now, she hasn't lost her keys in 3 months. Her bills get paid on time. And last week, a friend stopped by, and it was okay that her friend came inside. Her systems aren't flawless, but they're sustainable. And her progress isn't complete, but it's real. And so Zoe's story, her struggles, her shame, her half-finished systems, these are real experiences for millions of individuals with ADHD, and they live with them every single day. And so maybe you saw yourself in Zoe's piles of good intentions or recognized the ugly voice in her head. And so seeing her struggles from the outside, I hope that when you saw her executive function misfiring, you didn't think she was lazy, but that she was doing her best. Instead of failing, that you think she needs a different perspective And instead of that she's a mess, that you think she needs some grace. And my hope is that you can give yourself the same grace and compassion and understanding, because you're not broken. Your brain isn't broken. You just need different systems. And I hope these are your permission slip to move forward, honor your brain, and count everyone along the way, because if it works for you, it's perfect enough. And so, whoa, I went pretty quickly there at the end. And for that, I'm sorry. I wanted to make sure and have room for questions. And so I am happy at this point to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. That was an incredible presentation. And we do have a number of very good questions. Before we launch into it, I want to circle back ever so briefly to the poll question we asked at the outset and touch on maybe the top 5 areas where our listeners said they faced the most challenges. Number 1, by a long shot, 29% of people said feeling overwhelmed was the biggest barrier for them to declutter and organizing their lives. Number 2, no time or motivation. And I will say, based on the comments, I think motivation there is actually the key. Mm-hmm. Number 3, too much stuff. Number 4, sentimental attachment to items. And then the last was poor decluttering methods. So I'll go right to number 1, and that's the feeling of overwhelm. And you talked about the chicken noodle soup and identifying your 70 to 80%. But that is still tough for people to see, as you said, seeing like, I'm going to focus on the living room, because a number of people here today said, like, I can't have people over, right? So like, let's just focus on the areas where you would have guests for Q&A purposes. Can you offer some advice for or some real examples of how a very cluttered living room, we might take a first step past overwhelm, getting started in that space?
Yes. Okay. Here's what so your living room, you see it all the time. You see so much of it that you don't even see it anymore. And what you can do is you take a chair, stand in a chair in the middle of the room, and then look around. So what you're doing is you're seeing it literally from a new perspective. And so from that new vantage point, what do you see? And so what happens is that will allow you to deconstruct the soup and say, okay, shoot, look over here. I've got, Christmas gifts from 2 years ago that are piled in the corner. I can clear out that corner. And then as you're clearing out the corner, all you need is a starting place. And so from there, you don't have to jump around, although you may want to. I try to go in a circle. I just try to circle back around and make a perimeter of the room and then move into the center. And I understand, I totally get it, that the motivation is so hard. And so I would much rather, I have the same issue. I have a hard time getting motivated to cook. And so I understand it from that perspective. And so what you want to do is use those chore challengers that are in the handouts. If you can get a body double and say, okay, I've got this, I need to declutter my living room. And then you have a friend who needs to declutter their kitchen, and say, okay, so here's what we're going to do. FaceTime. We're going to FaceTime for 30 minutes and we're both going to declutter. And that body doubling, having that other person, is going to help you do so much more than trying to do it by yourself. And that's always a great way to get started. And then you can also tag a reward when you know you need to do something you don't want to. Make a playlist of songs that you absolutely love, and then never listen to them outside of when you're decluttering. Only when you're decluttering do you get to listen to these amazing songs or your favorite podcast. Reward yourself for doing it in the first place. Let yourself have a glass of wine when you're finished or while you're doing it. And so give yourself some grace. It doesn't have to be boring and laborious.
Yeah, I absolutely have some favorite podcasts that I save. And I try to convince myself that it's like time when, nobody asks me for things when I'm
Mhm.
decluttering because they don't want to get pulled in, right? So I'm
Right.
like, I have a bubble around me that is impenetrable to other people's demands. It sometimes works. So,
Mhm.
okay. Another challenge that came up quite a bit that kind of crosses a lot of those that I mentioned from the poll was getting other family members on
Mhm.
board.
And that's hard. That's hard. So, especially if you have, my husband and I were Mary Poppins and Jesse James. And so it is very different. And so I encourage married couples, partnered couples, give each person a space. Give each person an area of the home that they can keep however they want. My brain needs no visual noise, whites and grays, simple, peaceful. But my husband, he needs lots of things going on for him to feel safe. So he has a space dedicated to him that he can keep however he wants. I have my space that I can keep however I want. And we compromise in the middle. And so when you communicate and say, this is what my brain needs to the other person, hopefully they will at least be respectful of that and meet you in the middle.
Okay, that's helpful. I want to touch on two themes that came up that are somewhat related, but decision fatigue and
Mhm.
also sentimentality, sentimental connection to items. So a number of people saying like they just get physically exhausted with the task of figuring out where those tricky items should go, right? And those can just upend the whole process.
Mhm.
Any ideas on that specifically, like that decision fatigue? Where should this go?
Oh, for sure. It should go where you would look for it. And so it doesn't matter where your mom kept it. It doesn't matter where your grandma kept it or where your mother-in-law kept it. It's your home, your stuff, wherever you would go to look for it. So if you would look for the candle matches in the silverware drawer, put them in the silverware drawer. And so it's when we try to put them somewhere that is outside of where our brain would look for them, that's when we can't find them. And so even if you're not sure, I'll set something on the floor in my office where I have to step over it. So I have to think about it every time I step over it when I'm trying to decide where's a good place to put it. And so I leave it in the way so it can't stay there forever, but it also triggers my brain to think about it every single time. And so it's where would you look for it? And where whatever that answer is the answer. And don't second guess yourself. And then as far as sentimental things, when we can remember that we're hanging on to our sentimental things because of the memories that they represent, then when you have these sentimental things, if you try to articulate the memory, what is it that what does this bring back to me? What do I remember? What do I feel from it? And what's going to happen is when we start articulating that, we're going to recognize that sentimental value, sentimental attachment applies to good things and not so good things. And so set a limit for yourself that you only keep the good things and don't keep the things that don't feel good, but we're keeping them because we think we should.
Mm-hmm. Obligation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And I'm going to squeeze in one more just because lots of questions about bins, buckets,
Mm-hmm.
and other containers.
Mm-hmm.
People are wondering, like, do you literally mean like an orange Home Depot bucket?
No, unless you just like orange Home Depot buckets.
Right.
So, there's the cube shelving that they usually have the fabric buckets. At Target, they have hard plastic buckets that will fit in those. Some have lids. They have lids. I can have the lid. I can have off the lid. And so some are clear, some are opaque. But those are my favorite because they just line up. They're not round, so they're square. And, they might hold, I don't know how much, maybe 2 gallons if it was liquid. And so I can fit just enough in there. And so, a bucket may be a plastic bucket for your kids, but it could be anything that's open. And if it's just boxes, if you can't financially afford to go buy new things, then just get some consistent sized Amazon boxes, wrap them in, contact paper and make them look nice if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
And so by bucket, all I mean is open. If you have the bins and you want to take the lids off and just use the bins without the lid, that's really the difference, is the lid. And the lid makes it harder. And where it's open and bigger categories, using bigger categories is going to be so much more forgiving.
Yes. Perfect. Okay. Very helpful. Thank you so much. And unfortunately, it has to be the end of our Q&A. This was a jam-packed hour-long session. Thank you so much for sharing all of your insight and really hands-on tools here today, Jennifer.
Well, thank you for having me. I was so honored to be here.
And thank you to everyone who joined us here today. I will say, if you have ideas for other ADDitude webinars, please stick them in the comment box, or you can email us anytime at customerservice@additudemag.com. And if you would like the event resources for today specifically, you can visit additudemag.com and search podcast 592. The slides and recording will be posted a few hours after the live event. If you're listening in replay mode, you can simply click on the episode description. And please note, our full library of ADDitude webinars is available as a podcast that you can listen to while you're cleaning. It is called the ADHD Experts podcast. And we hope to see you again next week. We have another free webinar on Tuesday, January 20th. Stop people pleasing, halting the cycle of ADHD self-doubt, perfectionism, and procrastination. So a lot of parallels with today's talk. And then the following week is on resentment in your relationship. So also some themes from today. Wonderful. Well, Jennifer, thank you again. And thank you to everyone who joined us. We hope that 2026 is off to a good start, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.